before you start.
By reviewing the regular agenda, is there anything on the regular agenda that anyone would like to change, add? Nope, that looks good. Mayor, council, city manager, meeting updates. Emily, we'll start with you, please.
Sure, we had a meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission for the public hearing for the Lustrons to make them a city designated historic building property. And so that went well and passed and will be coming before council, I think the first meeting in February, if I'm not mistaken. So that's on HBC. Green space is going well. They have lots of programming coming up as well. So lots of things coming out of that group as well.
Sounds good.
Nothing for me, Madam Mayor.
No regular updates other than I attended the strategic planning committee meeting. Which what the chair.
You can talk about it if you want to.
Okay, we went over the survey results. We very thoroughly went over them. And a lot of feedback was excellent. We've taken those into account. We'll let you know more about that later. And we also talked a little bit about the goals that fall under the values. And we're going to meet again tomorrow.
Great.
Yes, we're about 50% done. We did take our time to go through the values and the results from the community. I have no updated commission's reports, but I am the new chair of the North Webster Neighborhood Coalition.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I think that's all I got.
Okay. Sarah, anything from you?
I can just give a quick update from the Old Orchard Business Association. We had an interesting update from Eric about the Big Bend streetscape project and kind of changes that are coming there. And I actually wondered if we might add that to an upcoming work session to talk about a little more about because there's multiple parts of Big Bend, I think, that are about to undergo some big changes. I think it would be good for the whole council to get those updates and to discuss them if possible.
So will you just remind us, I think I know what you mean when you talk about the streetscape project, but can you just give a little more description?
Sure. So there's going to be a bit of a changing of the striping on Big Bend and Old Orchard. And I know there's also some changes coming to Crossroads. But in Old Orchard, we're going to be going down to one lane in either direction for a good stretch of Big Bend so that there will be more parking on the street. And that won't be just during particular hours. That will be all the time. So it'll be quite a big change there. Part of it is in the interest of pedestrian safety, just knowing that we see so many, now that there's a lot of business activity there in Old Orchard, we're seeing more and more pedestrians kind of crossing and having some tricky traffic situations sometimes with kind of those lanes that move a little faster when they're going around those waiting to turn. So it sounds like the county is ready to move forward on making those changes, which is, I think, good news to a lot of the Old Orchard business owners. So, but it is a big change and one that I want to make sure that we're all well informed of, and even though there may not be much we can do to modify that on the county side, it still would be helpful for all of us to know, I think, kind of what's happening. So.
Great, thank you. Do we have any sense, I'm looking at Eric now, since you said he gave the report, when implementation will take place?
Madam Mayor and members, the council member did pretty adequately provide that. Implementation will be, I think they plan to release their striping RFP in the next couple months. To give you a sense of what we're talking about, from Gazebo Park to Laclede, we'll go to one lane in each direction. In the core of Old Orchard, we would have parking on both sides of the road. You go from Murdoch out to Laclede on that edge, parking only on the north side of the road, one lane in each direction with a turn lane in the middle. So the south lane parking right by where the Telly Tire new facility is, the former Subaru, will move to the north lane. where most of the retail is located in that area. This is what they call a road diet. So we're going to see that in Crossroads as well, lane restrictions. So in reality, much of the 2-lane Big Bend that is left in the city will be on the edge and conjoining with Shrewsbury, and the short pieces between around Webster U, between Webster U area and Old Orchard.
Okay, thank you very much. So yes, Sarah, I tend to agree with you. At least some public education about what's going to happen and why it's going to happen would be a good thing, including us. So can we at least get visuals maybe so we can actually see what we're talking about and maybe share some of those with the public? Anything else, Sarah?
Thank you.
City attorney, anything?
Nothing to report.
All right, city clerk,
No, thank you.
city manager.
Yes, ma'am. Just two things. We had our staff budget kickoff today. Budget time is always exciting, so it went well. Eric and finance team did a great job, of course, and you're going to hear a lot about budget this evening, so I'll leave it at that. The second one, in front of your stations, you have the senior newsletter. This is our new senior newsletter. We will have 3 of them per year. It's several pages, has a lot of different information, but really proud of this. And so big shout out to Public Affairs for doing this along. And Eric, remind me, who is this partnered with? Sorry. LPI, thank you. I'm sure the acronym. And then Public Affairs, along with the mayor, is setting up some visits with some of our local senior centers and other places to learn what they might like in the newsletter. So really looking forward to that. So if you haven't had a chance, please give it a read.
Really, that's it?
Yes, ma'am.
All righty then.
Quick question.
Please.
I had seen a question asking about when the results of the 2 surveys would be available. And it sounds like we're still going through the strategic planning results, but do we have a plan to make those available to the public? And do we have an estimated timeline on
So I'm gonna,
strategic planning?
yeah, I'm gonna refer that to the subcommittee and maybe you, since meeting tomorrow, right?
We're meeting tomorrow. Hopefully we'll be close to complete, but we've had
And
some,
let the subcommittee mull over how and when to release those results. I
Great.
mean, I think we should, I don't think there's any objection to releasing them. It's just.
yeah, I mean, all of them was pretty on point. We did make a couple of recommended changes that we'll bring back to the council. But otherwise, it's pretty much what we discussed and talked about in our meetings.
That's great. And the pool survey?
Pool ones will be presented at the January 26th meeting, unofficially, but after that, I believe it will be.
Okay.
Online, so I can touch base with that.
Thank you.
All right, excellent. I really, believe it or not, don't have any updates myself either, except to say thank you to Jenny Starkey for working on this. And in case you council members wonder who's in the council spotlight and why, some are in here now, and it's going, we started with some of the newer members and going to those of us who have been around longer. So, but everybody will be in this year, we promise. All right, why don't we move on to our topics then? We're going to start with the Arts Commission report to council. And I believe I see Katie Cahoon, Chair of the Arts Commission on Zoom, and let her join us. Yeah, she disappeared from one. I assume she's coming to the other. Welcome, Katie. We're happy to have you here. Hi.
Am I here? Am I here now?
You are here now, and Jennifer is, Jenny's sharing your screen or will be shortly.
Excellent.
And so you may proceed.
All righty. So this is just the State of the Arts Commission report for the year. We had our regular meeting last week, and at that meeting, we did some brainstorming about what we wanted to share with you. And Jenny has put together this lovely slideshow for us. So we actually have visual aids. That's very exciting. So we're the Arts Commission, and we have, as you know, just the past year asked to update our call just to sort of come more in line with what we have been doing and what we've been getting up to. Largely that change had to do with the collaborations that we are exploring and really working towards, which I think you'll find is kind of a theme about what we've been up to. I'm sure you're all familiar with this, so I think, Jenny, there we go. So in 2022, we had several collaborative efforts. We had a couple of concerts. For those of you who have not been out to enjoy these, we've done now a couple at Burr Oak in Larson Park. These are sponsored by Walter and Margot Parks. And they generously share their time and their talent and also their financial resources with us to make those happen. That's where this picture is from, and we get a really good crowd for those. We also did a piano fest this year. That's Michael Silverman, who again is sharing of his time and his talent. For that one, we partnered with Webster Arts as well to put pianos through the streets of Webster. We had artists out painting them. So we're really trying to get the whole community involved and get everybody excited about this event. And another great crowd turned out for that. In addition, we have done Poetry Month for years now. Many of you will remember Lauren Bacher, who was a longtime member of our commission, who unfortunately stepped down this past year. But she has always spearheaded this in collaboration with the library, the school district. And this year, we really worked to reach out into the business districts as well to try to collaborate to get some events out in the community that would draw people in to eat at our restaurants and to be part of spending money in our community, which is good. And of course, we do the Lifetime Achievement in the Arts Awards, where we highlight people in the Webster community who have done great things for the arts. This year, of course, it was Joe Rath and Dan Warner. And that's always a great event. I'm thinking that some of you actually came to that, so probably don't have to talk about that too much. But what's interesting about these is that it's all collaborative efforts. Of course, our original calling is public art, and all of the pieces of public sculpture that we have purchased to this point have been purchased from private donations. We have used some city money in order to maintain some things, but this has all been collaborative efforts. We have reached out into the community, and our community is so good to support us with our efforts in these areas. So looking forward, we have one of our current commission members, Beth Corelli, has been doing just a yeoman's job of pulling together information about all of the public art that we currently have in Webster. And we're in the process of putting that on our website in the hopes that we'll be able to do some sort of a QR reference thing, QR codes on all the pieces, so that people will be able to go through the community and find out more information about the art. We're hoping as a part of that as well that we can do some sort of an organized walk, the guided maps like we have for so many of our historic homes, just to encourage people to get out and explore the resources that we have. We have also just recently come to the idea that it might be time to think about refreshing our City of the Arts banners. And again, in that effort of collaborating, we were thinking perhaps if we could work with area organizations and individuals who would be interested in highlighting something about the arts, either an organization or an artist, something about Webster Groves, that we could have those printed up on banners and replace some of the original City of the Arts banners that have been up for a while now. We are, of course, always in search of new public art. Our real focus lately has been on a couple of mural projects. We had started in actually pre-COVID in an effort to put a mural over the railroad crossing on Lockwood, that's sort of just east of where Mary Queen of Peace is. we have not found the railroad to be very friendly to that notion, but we live in hope. And we have also had a proposal from a community group who would like to do a mural on the restrooms in Ivory Crockett Park, something sort of generated out of the community to represent some of their stories. And we have enthusiastically supported that. There is just the issue of, coming up with the funding on that one. And the other thing that we would like to do that we wanted to bring to you was to rename the sculpture garden in honor of former Mayor Jerry Welsh. I don't know that people are aware of how much Jerry really spearheaded that sculpture garden effort and really gave of her time and her energy to make it happen. And it just seems like it would be a fitting honor to be able to name it for her. So that's where we're headed for the future. Lots of collaboration, lots of things on the table. Our big bugbear is the funding piece of it. And you have been so gracious to allow us to use funds from the city and to put city funds towards our activities in the past. And we will be coming back to ask for more funding for things. But it seems as though there should be maybe some other way for some of these people who are helping us with private donations to make this happen, to get at least a tax benefit from that. And I know that, I know Eric came to one of our meetings and explained this, and I absolutely do not understand tax law. But it seems like maybe moving forward, it would be something to think about, since the arts are such a vital and important part of our community, that we have some sort of an organized structure in place to allow us to fund some of that, so that we can do some of these exciting ideas that we have. So thank you. I don't know if I'm supposed to ask for questions at this point.
Katie, we'll do that. I just want to give one update to council. The recommendation for the renaming of the sculpture park has now gone to the Parks and Recreation Commission, since it is a public park, for their comments as well. And so we'll get some feedback from them before any decisions are made as well. And does anyone have questions for Katie? Look at that. It's so good. You've left everyone speechless here. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it. We appreciate the presentation and the work of the Arts Commission. And I, as liaison, get an upfront view of how hard everybody works. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to Safe Kids, Healthy Communities Work Group. We have with us today Detective Lieutenant Jillian McCoy, who commands the Investigation and Support Division, and Jenny Weil, who is a community member and a child abuse prevention consultant. And as they're passing this out, I will tell you that this has been, they're going to explain to you who's been working on this, but I've had the opportunity to participate in some of these meetings, and it has been really heartwarming to see our community come together and really want to talk about this. So I will, we'll just wait a second, Jenny, until. All right, the floor is yours.
All right, Jenny, you got me? All right. I see funding.
This is one of those amazing things that doesn't really need funding at this point. So
Oh, absolutely, yes.
just get Sarah out of the way there.
Okay, I think we're on. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jillian McCoy. I am a lieutenant here for the Webster Police Department. I'm in charge of the Investigations and Support Unit. This is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart.
I've spent several years investigating crimes such as these. And when it was brought to me, I was all in. I thought this was a great initiative to bring this to light and get that topic of conversation going here. It's a hard topic. It's something that a lot of people don't want to talk about, but it's very important that we do talk about these kind of things. So, council, first, I would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to share what we're about to share with you and really listen to what we have to say, because it is very important. And we also want to bring to you this community safety pledge movement, which is very important to us. Jenny Dotson-Weil here has really brought this to light. I'm going to let her introduce you, but she has been the rising star of this, really the spearhead of this. She kind of brought me in as her little wing, and I've helped her along, and she's helped me too, but we work really well together, along with a lot of other people within this community. Great people who really want to make change. And so I really hope that you guys listen and think and take this all into account. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to ask both of you to use the microphone only because of Zoom. I think you were fine, Jillian, because you talk in a room before. Yeah. Yeah.
Right into the mic.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members. Thank you for having us here, and especially thank you to Lieutenant McCoy for working together on the presentation and really raising more awareness about the issue of child sexual prevention. As she said, it's a really tough topic to talk about, but one, as adults, we all have a responsibility and a role to play in preventing child sexual abuse. So it's a worthwhile topic to talk about. And a little bit about me. I am a citizen here in the city of Webster Groves. Prior to that, lived in Rock Hill for many years. I'm a parent and a child advocate. I work with Missouri Kids First, who is the state chapter for Prevent Child Abuse Missouri, as well as the state coordinator for all of the 15 child advocacy centers throughout the state of Missouri. So I do this work throughout the state, and I thought, what about my backyard? What's happening here? And so just seeing things, and it's just one of those things where you just have to step up and start taking action. So motivation to action happened about a year ago. I was listening into the Webster Groves School District school board meeting. I still have one in the district, and was wanting to hear next steps on the masking and COVID response. And what I heard in the public comment section were two young women and a mother who actually were alluding to uncomfortable feelings, unsafe feelings they were having based on some of the adult behavior happening. And over the years, I've been in a lot of communication with the school district, and they've been very receptive to education, awareness, ongoing organizational changes. And so I reached out to the board and to the administration and said, is someone following up with these children, making sure that the specific children who are speaking up were taken care of? And, what more can we do? We all can always have room for improvement. So the administration invited me to come meet with them. We met last January, and we're talking about some things organizationally they could do to move towards best practices. And started to talk about how not one single organization in any community can prevent child sexual abuse. The school district cannot be solely responsible, law enforcement cannot be solely responsible, religious organizations cannot be solely responsible. Child sexual abuse is a public health issue that really requires a community-wide public health response. And that's really where we are coming through with this Safe Kids Healthy Communities initiative, is coming together as stakeholders to have this discussion. Jason Adams, Dr. Jason Adams, the superintendent for instruction, suggested, hey, what about a community work group? But he didn't have to say that twice. Started really reaching out to stakeholders all across our communities who have interaction with children in any way, shape, or form. Oh, there we go. Okay. Thanks. So what we did was we met 4 times over the course of fall 2022.
As Mayor Burnham said, she was among, as was Lieutenant McCoy, about 20 adult community members who stepped up to be a part of this work group with this large objective of looking what we can do as adults in our community to prevent child sexual abuse. I co-facilitated this group with Amy Escott, who is a trauma therapist with Child Advocacy Services of Greater St. Louis. And she brought a great deal of expertise and information and I guess perspective about how this issue specifically impacts our community, which was very helpful. Over 20 community leaders, organization members, a religious organization, and individual community members gave up their time and effort to be a part of this community work group. And what we did over the course of those 4 meetings was to talk about root causes of child sexual abuse. And then what can we do based on evidence-informed public health-driven strategies as a community to prevent child sexual abuse? So Lieutenant McCoy is going to share a little bit more now about the prevalence and background on child sexual abuse, and then I'll move forward and tell you about the pledge and what we're asking you. Jenny. Okay, so we're going to kind of go over some statistics, it's numbers, and I know these numbers are hard and they're not easy to talk about, but numbers are real. Numbers speak truth and they do not lie. So we're going to talk about it. So 1 in 10 children will be the victim of sexual abuse before they're 18. There is an estimated 42 million adult survivors of sexual abuse living in the United States today. Child sexual abuse takes many forms, as you know. It's not just physical. A lot of people think that child sexual abuse is this physical element, but it's not. At its core, yes, sexual abuse is a sexual act between an adult and a minor. But it's not just that. It's also between 2 minors when one exerts power over the other. But also, to go further into that, it also includes no contact, this non-contact with this exposure of pornography, the internet. I mean, the internet is we deal a lot with that. In the voyeurism. Okay, so that is what we.
Lieutenant McCoy, could you get closer to the microphone? Thank you.
I literally walk around and talk as I teach. So it's kind of
We need a lavalier microphone.
Okay, so going to the next slide, Jenny. And if you look here, we're talking about roadblocks in reporting, which is it's so important. 1 in 10 children is what we know based on reported cases. Facts are, what do you think the average age of disclosure is? Anybody?
Past the age of majority.
Anybody else? 52 years old. So 52 years old is what we're talking about. That is the average age of disclosure. There are many reasons why people do not disclose, as you know. And I'll kind of go more into that. The act of disclosure is very unique, and it's unique to every individual. And may be a process over time that they have to deal with and work with. This is a reminder to our community and our community members that we likely do not have a complete understanding, obviously, to understanding the prevalence of child sexual abuse. So what do we know? Well, first, what we know is that child sexual abuse is most often committed by someone of a child or adolescent who knows, likes, or loves. And if you see here, it shows that. As a society, we need to move away from the midst of this stranger danger. As you can see here, right here where we're looking, 93% of survivors knew their abuser. Child sexual abuse happens in our community, and it does. It happens everywhere. Children, youth, parents, grandparents, it doesn't matter. It happens. It happens in our community. And what I will tell you is I myself have investigated several child sexual abuse cases in my career. And there is a good news to this, which is this. The good news of this is that adults can take concrete actions to prevent child sexual abuse. Jenny is perfect with this, and her and I and the rest of us within this community have worked for months about this. And she's really going to go into detail about how the city of Webster Groves can support this movement to help us. And she's going to go into detail. Great, yeah, we can go on to the next slide, and I can preface it by saying we are not for any money. Hopefully, that'll sweet them here. The outcome, so we have the work group. We learned that all these really important facts, it's something that needs a lot more light shined on it. It needs a lot more light shined that there are survivors in our community that need our support. And the fact that maybe some of the myths we have about child sexual abuse aren't serving us in terms of protecting children. So the Safe Kids Healthy Communities work group looked to strategies that they could use to get this information out into the wider community. One thing the group felt strongly about was not being specifically linked to the school district or any specific municipality, but really that we're responsible for all of our children. So within the bounds of the Webster Groves School District, you can see there is a movement of Webster Groves, Rock Hill, Shrewsbury, Orson Woods, and Glendale, supporting safe environments and healthy relationships. So those are the two things we need to help prevent child sexual abuse. And as we heard, it's most often with someone a child knows, likes, or loves. And so we need to take these measures where children are, where they learn, where they grow, where they play. So what we created is are the documents that you have a copy of, as well as you can see on the screen. On the screen on the left-hand side, the Learn the Facts goes over the information Lieutenant McCoy shared, as well as the history I've provided about the work group. Both documents have QR codes and links to a website that I invite you to check out. I don't think we're going to have time to move through it tonight, but it gives everyone the opportunity to sign the pledge and then receive a follow-up email. Then they can share and spread the pledge to other adults. It has a page to learn specifically about each element of the pledge, and it has resources for help and healing if people are concerned about a child's safety or if they need support themselves. On the facts page, I also want to point out in the lower left-hand corner, we really want folks to take action. This isn't just about providing some education and then folks saying this was interesting, I didn't know that, but really incorporating this into their organization, policy, procedures, operations. So on the bottom left-hand corner, our hope is that this general pledge will start to move into codes of conduct in organizations throughout our community. Codes of conduct, much like the pledge, are a way to have a unified language to talk about something that really is unspeakable and has been for in our society generally. So the pledge on the right, you can see there, highlights specific elements that are based on best practices from infectious disease control on how to prevent child sexual abuse in any organization that involves children and youth. So we encourage folks to not only connect with the pledge, you're able to click through on those resources, but then also adapt the pledge in the upper left-hand corner to put their organization's name. So for instance, the city of Webster Groves, if you were to sign on and say the adults of the city of Webster Groves or the adults of the Webster Groves Rec Center pledge to, and then this is something that can be shared with all employees, with all volunteers, with parents and caregivers, and that parents and caregivers can discuss with their children. So if an adult or an older child is crossing boundaries, or if they've been in an unsafe situation, there's a shared language to point to. We often have those moments where there's a gut feeling where something feels off, creepy, uncomfortable, and we don't have the language to use. So if we can all have a shared language, we can get help and support to kids who need it and also create safer environments. So I ask you to check those all out in more detail. And if you can move to the last slide or the next slide. So tonight, this is what we are asking you. First of all, you have also been given a proclamation, a sample proclamation. Child Abuse Prevention Month is April every single year. You may see pinwheels out. Pinwheels are the sign of Child Abuse Prevention Month. We ask you to adopt this proclamation prior to April. It focuses in on child sexual abuse specifically, the facts that we share, as well as the community safety pledge. So you'll get a chance to look through that. We ask you to support the pledge. We ask you to do that by, if you look at the pledge, there's quite a lot of white space at the bottom. What our hope is to fill that up with logos of municipalities, the school district, the Webster softball league, whatever organizations want to sign on and be a part of this pledge. We're trying to get all of those logos on there by February 28th. So then when we launch this in April, it'll be ready to go and the community can see that this just isn't Jenny making a nice thing, but it's the community. We all came together and really came together to make this happen. Then we ask you also to promote the pledge. So any channel of communication that you have in April or in anticipation of April, we would really welcome the opportunity for the pledge to be promoted, and we can provide the communication materials for that. So again, not asking for any extra costs, but things that you're already putting out there and potentially even providing the link on your website. And then most importantly, I ask you to read the pledge and consider how it can be incorporated into the programming of the city. So for those programs that you have that interact with children and youth in any way, consider how you can implement these safety strategies, creating safer environments, creating codes of conduct, making sure there's appropriate supervision. All of these things not only will prevent child sexual abuse, but other forms of harm to children as well. So sometimes it's nice to have great policies and procedures, but if they're not actually being operationalized, then nothing really happens. So this really is a call to action to sit and reflect on those policies and see how are they being put into practice and are we doing our best we can to protect children. So I want to thank you all and
Oh, don't, yeah, I was gonna say, don't go too far because we're gonna have some questions here. Are there questions? Yes, please. No, go to the microphone, please. Go to the microphone, please.
Go back one. So we kind of skipped over the attend part. Go forward. Oh, yes, the most important. Yes, the most important part. So we plan on having this event on April 1st. So it's going to be at the Rex. What we plan on doing is having this open forum. It will be structured, obviously, for an hour or two. But I think what Jenny and I really talked about was reaching out to our sources and our contacts. So for instance, I will be reaching out to the St. Louis County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, specifically the child sex team. So they would come out and they would provide resources to anybody, whether that's a parent, a grandparent, whatever. I also intend to reaching out to a few judges within the St. Louis County area. I know we were going to do the CAC and really focusing on child safety, right, well-being. So anything we would love, our hope, I think they said we could have 18 to 30 resource tables there. So anything the city's doing to promote child safety and wellness, I was thinking safety camp, it'd be great for them to have a table there. And we're really going to be reaching out to a wide variety of resources, therapeutic, safety, the hospital. So we're still in the planning for that, but really wanting this to be a community-wide event that children and families can come to and kind of take away the stigma a little bit about child sexual abuse and show them that just like having a car seat or a bike helmet, child sexual abuse prevention is something that we can talk about and that is okay. So yeah, we hope you can all thank you. That was a really important thing to talk about.
All right. Now, does anyone have questions?
Hi, I do. I was just curious, can you talk a little bit about the composition of your 20-person working group? And are you continuing to meet, I'm assuming now, to help with get this event going?
Yes, we are meeting tomorrow night, so start activating, so our to-do list is long. It was, and you all can help me here, but yeah, Mayor Arnold was there, City Manager Jennifer Yackley from Rockville was there, Fire Chief of Rock Hill, Webster Groves Public Library, the head of the Webster Groves Baseball Softball League, a number of administrators from the Webster Grove School District, as well as the high school principal, the high school nurse, the road nurse, social workers from the school district, member of Peace UCC Church, a number of community members, just parents who are interested. So I sent out emails last year to every organization. I went through every sort of major directory I could, and neighborhood coalitions, and the folks who followed, up and said they were interested. I said, please come, and they said, please invite more people. Just wanted to be as inclusive as possible. And the events on the 4th will be as well. We want to make sure there are populations that are specifically affected by child sexual abuse, and we want to make sure that everyone's represented at that event as well.
Thanks.
Other questions?
Thanks.
I do have one comment in terms of this community pledge. I think a lot of us are used to, in working in these areas, taking a template that somebody got you and gave to you and adopting that as, what your group's going to do. I just want to say this was not how this happened. Jenny and Amy Escott, who I have to put a plug in, is also a Webster resident, facilitated this group in writing from scratch this. And I think that's a true sentiment that this comes from our community, and we're just not taking another rubber stamp and putting it in our community box there. This is something that is really derived from community thought and action.
Can I add one thing to that, which is another important thing I forgot to mention, is that the original idea came from Bolivar, Missouri. The Briggs family had unfortunately, their son was impacted by child sexual abuse at school in 2016. And so they got a community work group together and created a community code of conduct, which was different from this. But I do want to honor that they were the motivation and impetus behind this, in terms of showing us that a community can come together. I've been in communication with the Briggs since we started this process, and they're thrilled. They love the evolution of where this has happened. And I think her words exactly were, wow, you all just took this to a whole nother level. So a lot of excitement around it, but I want to definitely credit that origination.
Sure. So we as a council, Jenny laid out what they're asking of us. Do we need to go back to that slide, or do you feel pretty comfortable that you understand what's being asked of us? Are we ready to commit to this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Sarah? All right, I don't think we need a formal vote on this, so it looks like we're good to go. And just so you all know, I'm now going to take your commitment as a council and go visit with my colleagues in all the school district cities and ask them to join us as cities in this process as well. Thank you both for your hard work and continuing work, and for your presentation tonight.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
All right. And now it's time for, as Lieutenant McCoy said, the numbers don't lie. We're going to see a whole bunch of numbers now.
Thrilling introduction. I will let Jenny pull up our report. There's many documents. Just quickly, I forgot to have this mentioned earlier at the beginning of the meeting. You probably noticed the cameras moving around a little bit, and that's we've added the auto tracking feature now. So you're going to see a little tighter shot on you when you're talking, but that is why I've been popping around to microphones, because it's using the microphone to figure out who's talking. So if you also why is the microphone on me and I'm not talking? Probably have some kind of noise going on that the microphone's picking up in some way. So just wanted you to be aware as that comes around. So, and you see those things.
Before you get started, Madam Mayor, since we're a little behind and I want to make sure council's able to hear the full presentation. I don't know if you want to
Once it becomes 7:30, if we could pause this, if there's an opportunity to resume, the agenda is relatively short. If you get through it in 15 minutes, that would be fine. I'm just afraid that you won't. Eric, how long do you anticipate?
It's all a matter of questions. I can get through it in 15 minutes, but I have a
Okay.
feeling we'll have some questions. So
All right, so we will aim for about 7:30-ish. And if we get past that and there's a good place to pause,
Okay.
we'll pause for the regular meeting and then reconvene.
sounds good. All right, Madam Mayor and members, the PowerPoint's up. You have many documents in front of you. I'll explain those as we go as they're relevant to the update that we're giving you. We can hit the next slide here, Jenny, and I'll grab this drive so you don't have to do it all night for me. We also have all these documents posted on our website, webstergrovesmo.gov/budget, links to the 5-year plan and these quarterly updates we're talking about for those at home. The PowerPoint you're seeing will be on as soon as we're done here this evening. Tonight, we're talking about a quick accounting update and then really our Q1, I see a typo already, Q2 budget performance update. We already did Q1, an update on deficit reduction that the council has implemented, the 5-year plan updates, and then our quarterly investment report for Q2. Some common definitions. I just want to go back and highlight the concept of a structural deficit that the council and the city have said that we are in and that we see. Structural deficit is when annual recurring expenses exceed the amount of the annual recurring revenue. So I'm going to make sure we talk about revenues tonight, either in recurring, meaning they happen and we can expect them to continue happening, or one-time revenue. When we talk about investments, that's all one time, right? So think of it, if your family's like your savings at home, sooner or later, if you keep using that for your regular monthly budget, you're going to run out of savings and obviously, not have those funds available. So just want to highlight that common definition for all those recurring revenues, one-time revenues. We've heard this before. Just want to again bring that up to the forefront. Our accounting updates that we've made in this quarter that you will see in the budget performance report that you have, we have added some new object codes to give both us and you some better clarity on sales tax specifically. Instead of having a consolidated sales tax line as we used to have in the revenue, we split those out for each of the sales taxes that we receive throughout the city in many different funds. This is the general fund listing that you see right there. The capital improvement sales tax was the former, what we call the municipal sales tax line. So there will be no activity in that line for this year because of course that's a tax that doesn't go to the general fund. So there'll be activity in that line in the capital improvement fund.
Okay.
And also then the local use tax 483 has been added for reporting on that revenue stream. We also, if you notice, our miscellaneous income is quite large year over year. We've really looked at that and there's some line items there that we think need to be reported separately and not just bucketed as miscellaneous. 2 of those being legal settlement proceeds and insurance settlement proceeds. To give you a sense, one legal settlement was $500,000. That obviously would rapidly overinflate miscellaneous income, and so we really needed to give those. So we'll continue looking at our chart of accounts. This is called these accounting codes, seeing what we need to add to give more description, not just for the one time, once every 5 years, but really what do we expect to see coming throughout the years. Our budget performance report. As we move forward, this is all funds. You can see that the budget, all funds, was a deficit budget spending off the fund balance of 2.4 million. Right now, we are ahead on the budget. Revenues exceeding expenditures by 3.1. All funds again, 50% of revenue, 57% of revenue in, 42% of expenditures. You can see where we were at this point last year. We're exceeding revenue and our expenditures. So the city's clipping along, both in its revenue being up from where we were, all funds and expenditures as well. The general fund, this is probably our most important conversation, and we'll talk more about the deficit a little later, but this is where we sit right now. The general fund budget deficit was a $246,000 revenue and expenditures. That's the amended budget. So that includes the deficit reduction that we did a couple months back. I'll highlight that. Right now, we're $770,000 to the good in terms of revenue over expenditures year to date. We're exceeding where we were last year, which is a good sign. Expenditures are slower than they were last year. Revenue is ahead of where it was at this point last year. Okay. I did highlight a couple other funds for you just to give you a sense, since we're in that wonderful period where we don't build or buy a lot right over the turn of the year. So the capital improvement fund, we are 46% of revenue in, 57% of expenditures made. through that fund, and we appear to be right on pace to meet that fund where we should be, so. And then the Park Improvement Fund, here we have 44% of revenue in for the year, only 15% of expenditures made. Park Improvement Fund usually sees its expenditures in the spring, so that's usually when we see those coming up. So this will change in our next quarterly update. Some revenue spotlights for you. This is the chart of accounts in by classification in the general fund. So these are our general fund revenues. When we talk about revenue issues and the deficit that the city faces, you can see what our budget is for each of these and what our year-to-date numbers are. I'll use property tax on top. We have 1.3 and the property taxes budgeted. We're just a shade over $1 million, so about 75% collected. Of course, now's the time that property tax starts to come in. We'll have a couple more weeks of higher returns there, and then the rest will be residuals coming in after the period. The county does do a good job of turning those payments around to us pretty quickly, so we're not lingering for a month or two. We usually get those within 2 weeks from when they're received. Intergovernmental revenue, this is mostly state funds, cigarette tax, motor license fees, things like that. 58%. Sales tax, we're at 45% of the budget total for sales tax. Utility tax at 45%. That's gross receipts, we usually call that. Licenses at 33%. This is an area that has fallen. Now, business licenses are a good chunk of this and aren't due, and they don't come back out until April. So that's a later year collection. Inspection fees and permits at 54%. Fines are down 39%. Court revenue is down versus budget. Not to an alarming point yet, but it is down overall. Charges for services, this is an area that we need to look at. We're at 20% of the revenue taken in. So these are the things that we charge for when we do services. So many of those, if you want to find out what they are, you'll be able to see them in our listing of accounts here. I can pull up real quick as we're talking about them. Things like street repair fees would be in this, the inmate security fund. So a small amount of money overall, I should say, $720,000, small compared to many other line items, but overall still down in terms of what we're receiving on that income. Really want to highlight, and I'll talk about this, recreation fees are at 50%, but our trend lines there are looking very good compared to the last couple of years. Other income at 178%. That would include our increase in interest over the budget, so which we'll mention as well. Other financing sources, that's the transfer. So that is the transfer from the 3 business districts and the ARP fund that you authorized in the budget. That is done in December. So hence why you see it on this report. So a couple of updates, local use tax that was recently adopted by the voters. We have received in 2 months of collections, $80,702. So that is on the old model of self-reporting. Year to date, if that continues under the mandatory reporting that started January 1st, we should be about 110,000 above the estimates for FY23. Utility gross receipts. This is telephone, electric, water, and the gas receipts paid by utilities as a tax to us. We're 223,000 ahead of where we were last year. So those trends, all 4 had been trending down. We're now at a path to really see a recovery, not pre-COVID numbers yet, but a recovery compared to where we were. I will say that while it's great that we're ahead of where we were last year, we maintained what I would call an optimistic budget, hoping that the numbers would come back. So it's versus budget, it's going to look very much like we met budget, likely, not that we exceeded the budget. Recreation fees, this is an area where we're getting close to this trend line as a credit to Director Davis, his staff, and the rest of the city to really potentially getting back to pre-COVID numbers on all recreation fees. Fitness, again, remains down as we've discussed, but other lines are well exceeding their budget targets and such. 235 ahead of revenue where we were at this point last year. And then our interest investment strategy is returning right now 1,140% of budget. So that's our interest is overcoming the budget there. So, which again, I credit to Director Mr. Donovan behind me for his work as well. So expenditures, some expenditures that we need to continue watching and looking at outside of revenue that are concerned. I don't want to say concerning, but we always watch electricity. This is a centralized spend. Why you don't see a full 5-year chart there We're 60% of budget right now on the electric bill, so that's through end of December, 9,000 ahead of this point last year. It's likely we're going to get real close to budget and probably peak over the budget in electricity. Natural gas, much the same. We are 59% of the budget right now for natural gas. Again, cold parts of winter could resurface here in any way. 11,000 ahead of where we were at this point last year in natural gas. In terms of personnel services, our two areas that we are watching in terms of budget are overtime in the fire department. We're at 69% of budget year to date. This estimate that I provided that I expect about 277 over is based on the trend of the pay periods and what we're seeing for the first 13 pay periods of this fiscal year, halfway through what we would see should that continue. And of course, staffing levels are required in the fire department. So that is the expectation. You can see last year we were at 580,000, 277 would be much about the same amount of overtime.
So we're projected to be 277 over.
That's correct.
So we're down. I still don't understand why this jumps so much. It's still an enigma to me as to the cause of this. And it's never really been, not that I'm asking for an explanation from you. I think the fire department owes us an explanation as to why, what changed. And I mean, I would love to hear that explanation because I don't think it's ever been fully provided to this council.
And I think that's would go most logically within our budget discussion, correct?
Absolutely. We'll be discussing that line item along with some others, and the overtime budget is certainly concerning. And during budget time, Chief Ellis will speak to that as well as some of the stop gaps that he's trying to do in terms of staffing. But it is concerning, especially in light of that the budget was increased for the fiscal year 2023 to cover more of that overtime. So we're definitely at a difficult part.
But I agree with Council Member Franklin here that, and the chief is here. So Chief, when you're preparing your budget remarks for us, you mind narrowing in on that a little bit so we understand where it came from? Thank you. Please go ahead.
So we'll go on to the next line that we're looking at, and this is police overtime. We are right now at 99% of the budget here at the halfway mark. We figure it's going to be about double the budget, so at about another 114 over. Again, the trends of the first 13 pay periods looking ahead and applied to the next. Now, my trend analysis is based on past practice. So obviously, if things change, if practice changes within the department, those could change. But we do generally know that there's a required staffing level needed, and that if there are vacancies or people on vacation, we could see some of that overtime continue. So overall, these two overtime lines, I think, are going to be our personnel service issue lines, if we want to say that, to watch for this budget and then also planning for 24.
I mean, this would be our biggest overtime, like over the past 5 years. So if we go 114 over, why is that this year? Why are we projected to be so far over on police overtime? What changed there?
I would imagine if there are vacancies, the force has certainly changed. Also, just simply staffing levels and require vacation, using comp time. I would say that, we had a lot of comp time banked and not a lot being used. And of course, the administration, that's a carried liability. We did make a change to comp time policy, so it's going to take people off work. Someone has to fill that spot. But that said, overtime is, we also need to manage to a budget in some way. So we'll be in those conversations about how we do that.
And Chief Curtis is also here. We're a room full of chiefs today. If you would mind putting that together as well. Sure.
Sorry, we've been down 3 to 5 officers staffing for the past 8 months, 9 months. We're about to be 4 more officers down. Overall, in terms of the payroll, we should be actually coming in under budget with the overtime and personnel costs because of that. That's where
Gotcha.
it's all coming from.
Gotcha.
Thank you, Chief.
Certainly both for police and fire, I want to echo what the chief said, that exceeding overtime, that one item doesn't necessarily mean that their budget, as you see in the reports, is over budget. There may be savings other places. So,
But it does call into question, right, whether we have sufficient staff. Sufficient, like, right, I mean, if we're doing overtime,
Well, and this isn't about not having the staff lines available because of overtime. This is about a shortage of police officers and
Yeah.
firefighters.
Yeah.
I don't know if the city manager would like to comment further.
Thank you. And Councilman Franklin, that's an excellent point. I will speak directly to police staffing, as Chief Curtis said. We are understaffed, and it's not for lack of wanting to, but that is certainly a regional experience as well, as municipalities have a very difficult time hiring. So we'll spend some more time on that during budget discussions, as well as trying to figure out some creative ways in terms of recruiting. We did send a younger recruits through Academy, and that has worked out very well. It's been a great addition, but that's an option. Do we do more of that? Which of course is also costly. So there's more discussions to come on that.
yeah, I was just, NPR had this great story today about how response times for police officers is way down. It's doubled in some jurisdictions because of police shortage nationally. So in other words, what I guess my question gets to is that there's even though budgeting, we might be okay, there's a real life consequence of the shortage.
Well, and that real life consequence also impacts our officers, right? Who
Yep.
have to work more than maybe their family or regular life would like them to.
I will comment that over the years, you have academy graduates, anywhere from 25 to 30. I think the last class was like 8 to 10.
Oh,
I
wow.
don't even think there's that many.
Yeah, and I think I heard 2 of them are already gone. So
Yeah.
it's just this bad situation.
Yeah.
All over.
We're in a good spot if you want to. bring it.
Yeah, I believe before we get into the deficit reduction plan portion, maybe we will adjourn our work session or temporarily adjourn our work session and then maybe go straight to our regular meeting, and then we'll take a little break after the regular meeting and finish up the work session, if that is amenable to all of you. I see no one saying no at this point, so I'm gonna forge ahead here. All right, welcome to the January 17th regular meeting of the Webster Grove City Council meeting. We are welcoming you all. You are also welcome to share comments in person or virtually via Zoom. If you are on Zoom, you're going to use the raise your hand function when we get to the remarks from the community and visitors. We ask that you, if you're in the room, fill out a comment card, which is located on the table over there. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes, and remember that these are time for public comments, but not necessarily responses from council. This is your opportunity to speak. Council won't necessarily speak back because we can get in touch with you later. All right. So I believe we need to start with the roll call.
Yes, Mayor. Mayor Arnold,
Here.
Councilmember Bliss. Here. Councilmember Franklin.
Here.
Councilmember Smith,
Here.
Councilmember Alexander.
Doesn't look like she's joined.
She's on.
We can't hear you, Karen.
Oh, there she is. How did I?
Yes.
Saved.
Here.
Yeah,
Councilmember
there we go.
Councilmember Richardson,
Here.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Here.
All right. We're going to go straight to remarks from the community and visitors, and we will start with Mr. Dave Buck.
Dave Buck, 124 South Elm. Katie, you can start right now. Your strategic planning isn't over yet, so I'm going to hit it one more time. This shares what I think Webster Groves can learn from 3 cities, Ladue, Clayton, and University City, where Barb and I lived, worked, and raised our family before we moved to Webster 23 years ago. Ladue has a population of 9,000. It has the highest median household income of any city in Missouri, over 1,000 people. They are laser focused on their unique identity, as Ladue knows exactly who they are and who they are not, where they are headed, and who they wish to attract. Is Webster finally ready to focus on its unique identity? Clayton, population 17,000. We're good friends with Mayor Michelle Harris. We all work together at Ralston. Was built by putting two stakes in the ground, restaurants and the arts. And the rest is history. And what's driving Webster's popularity and identity today? Restaurants and the arts, the fine arts and the culinary arts. So when is Webster finally ready to own City of the Arts across all sectors of our community? Lastly, University City, population 35,000. I know Joe Edwards, and the famed U City Loop was created with youth in mind. David Franklin is a millennial, and I believe he's the youngest on city council at what, you're 35, 36 or something. But almost 30% of Webster's population are youth 24 years and younger, otherwise known as Gen Z. Laura, these are our kids, as you know, and they have a different worldview and values than we do as adults. Is Webster finally ready to create a youth advisory board with kids from Webster U, the school district, other schools in the city? I think it'd be a really good idea. We need their input because they think a lot differently than we do. Thank you. Okay, time.
33 seconds left.
Wow, Dave, that's a record. Thank you. All right, our second speaker card comes from Carl Wolf. Carl, please come on down.
Can you hear me well enough? I'm just here because I have terrible memory and I don't deal well with people, to be honest. I tend to take one foot out of my mouth and mumble around the other. I approached Laura 4 months, 5 months ago. I'm not sure. Something like that. And I was trying to press for adoption of, from my standpoint, a more progressive interpretation of the building code. We're currently operating under 2015. I'd like to see 2018 or 21 building code adopted, which allows for a slightly greater area of roof on a residential property to be devoted to photovoltaics panels. And I'll say, because I don't deal well with people, I blank out when people tell me something that I don't, may not be what I want to hear or whatever. And Laura, last time I spoke with her, told me something, and I think it went right past me. And what I think I heard was she said, we have a S code. And I don't even know if that was anything like what was said. That's what I might have heard. And it was saying, as I interpreted it, that we were not moving forward on the adoption of the 1821 building codes for photovoltaic photovoltaic panels. And so I wanted clarification about what I probably misunderstood. Is that possible?
So this really isn't the forum for you and I to have a conversation about this because it is just community comments. And as I said today, I'm happy on Thursday morning to talk with you at length about this. If you want to come back, or we can schedule another time to do that.
So I've been in, and I guess the last 4 times I've missed you because you weren't either in the office or it was,
I actually took a vacation. I think the world can know that I took a vacation.
And so I was just, trying
I
to,
promise you I will be there Thursday morning.
yeah. And it's making it's leaving me not having a definitive design potentially for my roof layout, depending upon which way I'm able to go and affecting how much difficulty
Time.
Anyway.
Could you have something in your hand though that would help explain what you're asking for? Is that,
I don't know how to format it for visual display.
I have a copy of it and I will share that with council.
excellent. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Are there any online comments? Anyone want to raise their hand?
No.
All right, then we will move on to new business. Mayor, council member, city attorney, city manager. Anyone have new business? Okay, well, then we're going to go on to our agended new business. Council member Hickson Shepherd, will you call for the first and second reading of bill number 9212, please?
Yes, Mayor, Madam Mayor, I'd like to call for the first and second reading of bill number 9212.
Second,
Bill 9212, an ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement with the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission Surface Transportation Block Grant, STBG, program agreement for ramps and reconstruction of concrete pavement on Elm Avenue at Shady Grove Creek.
Any discussion? I'm just going to say hooray that we're taking a step that's still going to take us a few years, but please, let's have the second reading.
Bill 9212, an ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement with the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission Surface Transportation Block Grant, STBG, program agreement for the design and construction of a culvert, new guardrail, new sidewalk, curb ramps, and reconstruction of concrete pavement on Elm Avenue at Shady Grove Creek.
All right, Council Member Franklin, would you call, or first, does anyone want to remove the minutes from the consent agenda? Since that's the, no, there's a resolution there too, sorry, backside. Anyone want to remove either of those things? All right, Councilmember Franklin, would you call for the approval of the consent agenda, please?
yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to call for the approval and adoption of the consent agenda.
Second. Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes. We have made no appointments to boards and commissions, but I will take a moment to ask anyone who is interested in boards and commissions assignment to take a look at our social media today and the city website, our partnership with United We on the appointments project, which helps people understand the process for applying and what it means to be on a board and commission, and specifically is focused on improving representation on those boards and commissions, is live. And so that's a first week of February event. So please do take a look at that. And so we are going to have a closed session, but I think we're going to finish the work session first. Do we need to adjourn? Do we need to do anything formal to just put this meeting on hold while we go back to the work session?
We need to call for a closed session. You can either do it now or after the work session.
Okay, why don't we just wait to do it right before we actually do it? And so why don't we then take like a 3-minute break and then we'll come back and consider we'll finish up the work session. And that means you're up, sir,
All right.
to
So,
continue.
Ms. Starkey will pull up as we continue the budget update. We'll get to deficit reduction. As it comes up on screen, we're on a slide for those of you looking on the printed paper, page 11, the deficit reduction policy. With the next slide, Jenny, I'll find the mouse here real quick. Deficit reduction policy, you all know what this is because you helped pass it, or you did pass it, I should say. I'm going to go the right way. Why can't I go the right way? Let's go back. Resolution 2222. Really, I just wanted to highlight what that resolution says that administration must do with the budget. The key thing, of course, is the lapse this year of $1 million of expenditures, no growth rate in expenditures going forward, and then really eliminating the deficit by the close of fiscal year 25. So the 3-year plan to close the structural deficit. That's what I wanted to highlight about that. So where are we at with deficit reduction? To date, we have eliminated $683,000 from the general fund budget. So from what you adopted, we've eliminated 683. Now, when we look back, I'm going to bounce back here to the policy. We talk about from the adopted fiscal year budget, and that I just want to highlight the nuance of this word adopted here. because obviously we just had the police CBAs, which increased expenditures. So we're working in terms of that $1 million lapse from that adopted number that was passed in June, not inclusive of the amendments that added some spending into the general fund. Okay, so wanted to make you aware of what we're doing and how the administration's treating that in terms of being faithful to the resolution that's before the council, or that before us that the council passed. Did you move the mouse too? Oh, maybe just me. Someone's moving the mouse. Right, there we go. All right. We have ghosts and gremlins. Why not? So deficit plan reduction, where this all comes back together. So about the deficit and the 5-year plan updates. It's a very big chart. You all have this in a printed copy. So those at home, I'm sorry you can't see it, but you can find this online. I want to point out some very good news for the city is that because of the work with deficit reduction and one-time revenue, we may have a surplus this year when we close this year. Now that's if, big if there, budget limits are met, right? So any overages and overtime we talked about, sewer and gas, electricity, those kinds of costs, fuel oil will reduce that possibility of the surplus. So when we look at the 5-year plan, you've all seen this before, that green area is what you've seen, the top part of the slide. The green area is what you've always seen with the budget as amended, those totals, and then applying that average growth rate. So if we change no practices and grow like we have, what does that look like going forward? As you can see, and I want to highlight this 1.7 deficit right here in the green by the balance total. That is our, I would say, true deficit at the time of budget adoption. So the budget expenditures, recurring expenditures, things we're going to pay for next year and such, was $1.7 million under the recurring revenue we had to pay for it. We then have broken out one-time expenditures in the blue here below. And so there's no one-time expenditures that we've seen in the general fund as of yet that are one-time, right? That the all reasonably can be construed to be coming back next year. But we do have one-time revenue that we have put here. So we've removed it out of places in the budgets up top, if it was budgeted, like ARP revenue loss, that 771,000 is now in that blue section because it is one-time revenue. You would take the council again saying, put more ARP money in next year to put that in. Also, insurance settlements, $41,000 from insurance settlements that we've received. The legal settlement from the cell tower lease of $500,000. The opioid legal settlement of $19,000 some dollars is a one-time revenue. Also, St. Louis County, this is the issue that came up with Brentwood. They refunded and reimbursed us for the sales taxes that we didn't receive. Now, some of that was fiscal year 22 revenue, but we got it so late 22 was closed. So that's $57,000 that is one-time revenue in this budget. So that one-time revenue of 1.3 million, of course, reduces the deficit greatly down to 324,000. And so when we look at planning for next year, if there is one-time revenue planned in the budget for the general fund or expenses, you will see them in the blue line here in that area of the 5-year plan. And then the deficit reduction down in the bottom shows you what we've taken out under deficit reduction. So again, it's 683 million in 683,000, all in personnel services. That brings the expenditures and down to 18.8 revenue for this year. Again, this year that's reoccurring and one time together at 19.2 balance totals of potentially a $360,000 surplus. Now, any overages in budgets, going forward would affect that possibility. As you can see, if we were able to hold that deficit reduction and using that one-time revenue, we essentially have a $600,000 deficit next year to deal with rather than a $2 million deficit. So
the one thing that this does not take into account though is a new CBA for the fire.
that's correct. That is so that none of that spending has been authorized or even estimated in any way, shape, or form. So
And to the good, since that obviously is real, this doesn't take into account whatever real numbers we have from the use tax.
that's correct.
Which
So
seem to be not exactly what we think.
correct. So this does have built in the 250,000 this year, and then an estimate of 500,000 next year is what we had estimated 250 for half a year, 500,000 for a full year is what is built into the revenue estimates. So
This does take into account the CBA for the police though.
That's correct. So
Good.
that's the functional, why we use that FY 23 budget amended. So we're looking at the amended column of the budget. So as you do a budget amendment mid-season, we're adding those costs in and those revenues.
Is it, I saved these, is it possible to date this document
Yes,
or
We can do
these
that. Yep,
so that we know relative where we are?
absolutely.
Thank you.
So I do want to point out, though, if you look at the improvement in that bottom bullet right there, the improvement here that we are seeing is great news. It doesn't solve the deficit. So again, even the best case scenario right now, potentially a $600,000 deficit to deal with next year. Now, there are one-time ways to get through that any year, but also sooner or later, those savings will come about and need to be done.
But I mean, props to you and Dr. Peoples though, because I mean, what this is showing is that over a 5-year plan,
Microphone.
we've already halved our deficit projection,
That's correct.
which is impressive. And
More than,
more than halved our deficit projection, and we're only a quarter into this new fiscal year.
Thank you. So as we look at the chart, now obviously some of the numbers have improved, but you've seen this chart. I'll give you the quick rundown. The red line is our expenditures as budgeted. The dashed line is if we put that average growth rate, that's where we would grow to. The green line is our revenue, not including the transfers, right? So we used to have the public safety sales tax fund. It's now part of the general fund, but so that is our revenue projection right now based on average revenue growth. The blue line, just for historical, is that revenue with those transfers from other funds that came in. So deficit reduction, the yellow line is what the deficit reduction policy says, right? Cut the million, lapse the million, and then hold the line on spending. Right now, the way the administration has it set up, we're right here at the orange line, 683,000 cut. That's what the orange line looks like. Now, again, even 2 years of holding the line, you still see a growth in rate, right? Because sooner or later, those costs are going to grow. The real question is, how do we attack this, excuse me. But as you can see, we have narrowed the gap significantly between, without having the plan and now looking towards the plan, and how do we get these two lines to meet, the green and the orange? Soon, hopefully be the red. So
that means we need more revenue sources.
Yes.
So ultimately, yes. So we told the staff today in our budget kickoff that, FY 24 needs to look at revenues just as much as cost control was on the table. And it certainly needs to be, revenue has to be on the table as well. And that is tricky in a lot of ways, because to be blunt, many of the taxes that we're authorized to take here in the city, by the state, we are taking, right? I mean, there's again, back to real questions about land use. We see this, and I'll talk briefly about this in the business districts. Old Webster is a great example. Their property tax returns are actually falling, right? Because essentially with the Hancock Amendment, the value keeps going up, the rates have to come down, but there's not enough new development and new growth happening to actually give them net new construction to move the property taxes up in terms of the amount collected by the government.
so we have mentioned several times having a session on revenue issues themselves. Is that currently planned in the part of our budget discussion? Because I think we've kicked this down the road a little ways and probably need to find some time to really highlight that issue. It keeps coming up.
So we have on February 7th, budget outlook meeting with you all about, sort of to get a sense of priorities that you're all thinking of the budget as the administration puts the budget together. I do think there's probably a whole nother session there with some ideas that are outside of finance as well. Some of the things I talked about, like if you're going to talk about development, how does that happen? Where are those potentials at? I've heard it, we've talked briefly, and I don't want to raise alarm bells, but potentials for annexation, other territories. I mean, there's all sorts of tools that are potentially available. It's a matter of, what you all wish to try to exercise and lead forward on.
So from what you just said, it sounds to me like the 7th, we'll touch on some of these things, but then we'll need another session as well. So we'll figure out a time to get that on the calendar.
Yes.
Thank you.
In the meantime, I would appreciate hearing from you all individually on some of those items. We've talked about land sales, those sorts of things. Potentially, if you have ideas, if you are leaning one way or another, just if there's other things you would like to hear about in terms of revenue development, please let me know and we can start building that in to our discussions and then to the presentation.
I did also want to just add, I know we talk about one-time revenues as not the solution for the structural deficit, but they are a helpful thing to the fund balance, which of course we need to watch. And the fund balance becomes the way, should we need to use savings, that's what it really is. So one-time revenues are still incredibly important to this issue. They are just not the direct correlation to solving the structural deficit. So the 5-year plan updates, we have, as per our direction with the 5-year plan policy that you all passed a little earlier, started and have provided you the first round of the updates for the other funds. So you will see there are 9 funds that are either created or in process. The first 3 that I've given you are Old Webster, Old Orchard, and Crossroads. Much of these have one-time expenditures. And of course, as we dig through other funds, it'll take a little while, but they're the same functional look. They have obviously don't have a deficit reduction policy, but you're going to see those one-time lines there. I highlighted these 3 for those of you that are liaisons. I'll be calling for a budget meeting with the chairs to talk about the business district budgets because we are facing a moment where soon the revenue they provide to the general fund is not going to be sustainable for them, right? And so there's really a question for the business districts, the service load that they're trying to pay for, what they can actually pay for, and such, and really ultimately barring any revenue source, which is incredibly hard to increase in the business district, takes a lot. How do we look at, what the service provisions are? So as we plan for that budget.
Eric, I was just gonna ask, I don't know what the legality is, but have we ever discussed combining business districts in order to create cost savings?
Yes, I think we've discussed it certainly as staff, I pondered it. I mean, one of the things I do look at is that, we have 3 great business districts, but their ability to scale is very small because they essentially are working with a small amount of money. That identity is very important, right? In terms of legalities, I would work with Neil on this. I think there is some need for some contiguity between them, but it's not explicitly clear in the statute that's about them. But I think the biggest fundamental thing is identity and between the districts. And I don't know that all 3 of them are prepared necessarily. No, it's not the advisory commission's decision. I want to be clear about that. It's your decision, right? As the council, but there are, the willingness of those who would be paying that extra tax within the district. So. And they all operate with different priorities. So,
Because Pam, I think you've mentioned this before, how we're one of the few municipalities that have multiple business districts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Separate businesses.
yeah,
Separate,
most of them have one because most of them are built around one downtown core. Webster's identity coming up over the years had multiple retail locations. And then, of course, for those without Zeta Dell, that area, Yorkshire, without a business district, they are limited to what the city provides out of general fund services.
I never thought about that, like how Yorkshire does not have a business district. Yeah, maybe, yeah.
So these 9 will all be provided soon. I'm hoping within the next 2 weeks, we'll have them all finalized. Capital improvement and park improvement are certainly the big ones. There are a lot of one-time costs there, so they may look a little different than this form you're seeing, but they'll all be posted on the website with a sense of where we're going. Now, capital improvement is well constructed because it's in our budget as a 5-year plan. But there are also other things we talked about in that large reserve. I did not plan to do an ARP fund, a Firehouse 2 fund, or the grant fund 5-year plan. First of all, the grant fund fluctuates year to year depending on what comes in. The other 2 funds are going to be done within the course of the 5 years. Police and fire pension fund and the debt fund, I'll set up special plan designs that'll probably look a little different than this, just to really match the specific purposes that those pay out of. And then, of course, the pension fund is built on actuarial estimates that I would not try to claim to be an expert and do. So rely heavily on loggers for that. So our quarterly investment report, I wanted to bring this. This is our first under the new policy that you passed last month. And so you have this on your sheet, on your desk, the quarterly investment, the schedule of investments for those at home. And well, now it's frozen up on me. Let's see if it comes. So for those at home that are watching along, we have $22 million in investments and cash, $22.9 million in investments in cash. That is, for the lack of a better term, the city's savings and investments. 11 million of that is invested in the various types of tools that we can invest in. Liquidity, that is 52% liquid, 48% illiquid as of the end of December, 12/31. The yields we're receiving on those tools range from 0.05% to 4.83%. Of course, most of those the higher yields are new, and the new strategy we talked about, our weighted average yield is at 3.51%. I won't dwell too much on this other than to say, as administration, we are looking at that liquidity benchmark. As I've talked to colleagues and what I'm seeing across from finance officials across the other cities around the country, is that really they're holding liquidity at about 80-20, meaning 80% invested and 20% liquid. That's an incredible potential to move a chunk of liquid cash that's not making much money at all. I mean, 0.001 in some cases into some shorter notes to take advantage of this interest rate time and put some more recurring income back in the system. But if there are questions, this is the investment report that we are to provide for you. So I want to make sure to.
I just want to say congratulations. It's great work. Getting the weighted average yield on the bank accounts is good. And those interest rates on the CDs are right on target.
It's amazing since our conversation last, how many banks that, we were potentially moving out of all of a sudden came up with new rates. So.
I was gonna say, it doesn't look like there's any change.
So some of them just simply haven't come up and for maturity yet. So
Okay.
we haven't had an option yet. But there is, banks are coming with rates. Now they're trying to be competitive, but to be honest, most of provide so much liquidity and opportunity there with a higher rate, whereas banks, well, sure, we'll give you 4%, right? Well, but I'm missing out on the potential increase a month from now that we're going to see in the market and such.
So are you looking at credit unions, or is it not?
We
not
haven't
practice for-
historically looked at credit unions as
Okay.
an investment opportunity. Now, that said, we will have, and will this spring, back in a couple, 2-3 weeks, the city will need to put its RFP out for banking services. And so that is a time really when credit unions would have their best opportunity with the city, is if they're going to become the depositor for the city.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I got a few hookups for you.
I figured I'm going to get lots of hookups. So everybody wants the money these days. So I think questions, that's a lot in our quarterly update, but I did want to take a moment to answer any questions you have. I do want to just highlight not just the work of the finance team, but all folks across many departments, both in cutting and controlling costs and dealing with that, but also then with revenue issues. I mean, rec fees are not driven by finance and folks in City Hall. That's driven by a quality product that people want to come use. So I just want to take that moment from my perspective.
Congratulations to the union team. You're moving in the right direction, and I think we'll continue.
Is this our second quarterly report that we've received?
That's correct. For this year, yes.
Excellent, thanks.
Yes.
And do we know how we plan to close that gap between the $1 million in cuts and the 600,000 that we're at?
I have ideas, but I don't know if we have ideas. So.
Or when do we have to make this? Or I mean, I guess we don't need to make decisions. You make, right?
Oh, you're gonna make all kinds of decisions. But
We can delegate that.
but those decisions are gonna come with sound recommendations. That is the budget process and the calendar that we've put together. You'll hear the budget presentations from the directors. I, of course, will have my own recommendations, hopefully that will align pretty closely with the directors, but we'll have to talk about several things. There's still also many unknowns just in terms of some of our projects. We don't know what healthcare costs are gonna do this year. I think last year they fluctuated 7%. Quite frankly, this year we could see that might be lucky to see that same number again. So there's lots of unknowns, and that's really going to be the difficult part in between closing that gap. I believe it was Councilman Smith who was talking about revenue, which you all have to some degree, along with cost containment. We don't have a lot of costs that we can contain. Our expenses are in our people and healthcare costs and loggers and all of those things. So anyway, we will definitely bring forth some recommendations, and then you all get to make the hard decisions.
I know we do that for fiscal year 24, but we still have some of the million to make up for fiscal year 23. Right?
Yes.
That's what I'm
sorry.
Sorry, that's what I was trying to get at. Like,
Yeah.
do we have a plan for the next 5 to 6 months to close that gap?
We do. What I would like to see is more of the use tax, since what we have so far is, Mr. Peterson said, is based on the old model. I'd like to see what the mandatory reporting brings in. So yes, there is a plan, but I'm hoping we can get some more revenues. Also, when we talked about that $1 million deficit reduction, we didn't have the marijuana tax on the table as well. So I'd like to learn more about that and see how that plugs in.
Did the revenues play into the $1 million or was it $1 million in expenses that we were cutting?
In expenses.
So we want to see those things, but
I want to see those so I can also come with some recommendations and hopefully soften some of that, the gaps that we have to hit. So short answer, yes, we have a plan. Long answer, more to come.
okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Right, I will just also, in addition to Councilmember Smith's words of thanks, I'm going to add my own and also say thank you to you all for how hard you've worked on making everything publicly accessible. And so, you know, anybody who wants to know anything about our financial situation now can learn just by going to our website. So thanks for that as well.
Thank you.
All right, we do need to have a closed session. I believe, is there anything else we need to do before that? Since we kind of went out of order, I just want to, no, all right, I think we're there. Councilmember Bliss.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for an executive closed session related to attorney-client privilege communications, Missouri statute 610.021, open parens 1, close parens. Personnel, Missouri statute 610.021, open parens 3, close parens. And negotiated contract, Missouri statute 610.021, open parens 12, close parens.
Second.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander. Yes, okay. Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
All right, thank you all for joining us. This now means that we're going to talk amongst ourselves a little bit. So thank you.